to anyone, maybe I'll read one or two of the questions that have come back, maybe back to David and Joe in regard to what the Irish market should be doing in relation to using more sustainable materials in off-site construction. Do either Joe or David want to...
I might make a quick comment on that before David. I think we need to think about sustainability in a much broader sense than just renewable materials. One of the concerns about off-site manufacturing is the impact, carbon impact in particular, on transporting units from a distance. We did a project a few years ago where all the walls were prefabricated in concrete in Germany, and then they were brought along the Rhine as far as Rotterdam, then put in a boat, and then brought to Dublin Port, and then put on low loaders and travelled all the way down to Killiney. And the carbon impact was huge. So it goes beyond just using sustainable materials. I think we have to look at the entire carbon footprint of what we do.
Another question from Keith there. Oh, sorry, David, do you want to come in there?
Well, I was just going to add, I mean, the four areas are there's operational carbon, embodied carbon, sustainable connectivity and transport, and then the sustainable life cycle cost, and the fact that I do think OSM does lend itself to being recycled at the end of life. So that's one good advantage of it. Okay.
Yeah, very good. So we have a comment there from Keith. What are the views on design for end of life and disassembly, and what impact do you think this will have on design responsibility, specification, and sustainability? That's a tough one.
Well, I mean, in terms of life cycle cost, I suppose you need at the start to try and carry out a whole life cycle analysis rather than just concentrate, as we always do, on the capital cost, and look to see how the building will perform over its life in terms of energy costs, management and maintenance, running costs, and all of that. And I think, as we said, as was alluded to earlier by Ralph, I think the idea of bringing in biomaterials that degrade well at the end of life will be helpful.
Very good. Okay, do we have any questions from the general audience who'd like to come in? Maybe they might give their name, the company, and the question, and who you're directing it to. Anyone like to start? Don't be shy now. There's 48 of you there. Anyone want to ask a question? No? Okay.
Alan, just there's one question there for VB. I can answer it
yes.
In terms of current fire and sound regs. So basically, regulations sets the foundations for our business. So the fire testing and the partnerships we have for fire testing with the likes of BRE underpins our certification, and that certification is in SAI certification in Ireland up to 10 stories. So all our fire testing, our acoustic testing, etc., are fed into that robust certification. So absolutely, we comply with all sound and current fire regs. And in relation to this, I suppose the added thing is it's very project specific. So so the DB rating can be as high as required in terms, and it all depends on the wall build up, etc.
Right, very good.
Alan, I've got a question. Maybe you can throw
it in there.
How will OSM respond to the cyclical nature of the building industry that's market-led? So we've got factories with optimal performance needs. In a boom, they're going to be overstretched, and that might lead to anti-competitiveness or delays. In a bust, the companies that are producing the OSM units potentially are going to be struggling, and therefore delivery, having already been paid for upfront, may become at risk. So how will we deal with that, unless we go to an anti-cyclical form of delivery of building projects? How do we deal with that?
Of course, the world is global now, isn't it? It's not just, Irish companies, it's not just companies dealing in Ireland, it's we heard about this, the idea that you're going to be delivering or designing, constructing anywhere in the world. That's just an observation I have. Maybe would Raji take that one?
Yeah, but I think to your point, one is if you look at what people are saying is you have different types of buildings. So it could be cyclical in terms of different sectors. So it might be that, hey, what you're specialized in before, you might be able to actually support a different types of buildings and so forth. So I think geography, as well as the whole idea of not being specialized with any one specific type of building project. So and that's where we are seeing some of that. So, but I think ultimately it's coming back to, is it going to be truly cyclical across all, or are there going to be some anti-cyclical things where you can
I know, Raji, you spoke a lot about new business models, the new normal, the new culture, tipping points, speed of the factory, a new breed of modular builders. I'm just wondering, will this sort of tipping point you talked about and this increased interest in modularization and off-site lead to maybe companies starting to merge, design companies like Joe's company merging with a construction company? I'm just thinking, will we start to see more multidisciplinary service companies?
And I think to your point on that, even for us, even though we are a pretty young company, even a couple of our own customers have already done that. So Skender has acquired that architectural firm in Chicago, and they've become a DMC, design manufacturing construction company. And then Factory OS was in California, was actually David Baker Architects and Canon Constructors and Rick Holiday, who was the developer. They all came together and said, let's create a new company. So so there are all these things happening where we could see companies merging. It could be people encroaching into other sectors, and therefore now those other companies have to change their business model. So it's becoming the whole supply chain is going through a rapid transformation.
Yeah, I suppose if we keep doing what we're doing, we're not going to get the different result that we want. So at the end of the day, it is about a change in mindset, isn't it? It's a change. And if we don't do it, someone else is going to do it and disrupt the market and maximize their business as a result. So interesting. Just a point I was going to raise with David, actually, you mentioned very early on, or it might have been Joe, about the challenges with BCAR, and that BCAR really can't work with OSM. Could you maybe allude on that? And maybe Brian might have some real life Irish examples. Just for our international visitors, BCAR is our building control system, and how you can control the quality in the factory with that system would be interesting to hear.
Maybe I'll just do that because I'm heavily involved for my sins in BCAR here. The BCAR is based on the premise that at the end of the day, two individuals certify that everything is compliant, both from a design point of view and a construction point of view.
Right.
From the inspection, the non-contractor party in that is called the assigned certifier. And the assigned certifier takes in a load of ancillary certs from different people along the chain. But at the end of the day, he or she signs the final certificate saying that he or she is happy to rely on all the certificates, sub-certificates, if you like, that have been received. Now, it's a blunt enough instrument. It was produced fairly quickly, and it's quite simplistic in its overview, in my opinion, as to how buildings are procured. But it doesn't really envisage, or it didn't really envisage, how off-site manufacturing might fit into that model. So I believe the Code of Practice for Inspecting Works, which was published in conjunction with the regulations and which we're obliged to follow, needs to take into better account how OSM should be integrated into that inspection and certification process. And as I said, nobody, including lawyers, know what the actual liability is going to be for assigned certifiers at the end of the day. There's so many conflicting legal opinions on that. But I think the code of if we had a code of practice amendment that specifically dealt with OSM, it would give a lot of clarity to those involved in the BCAR process.
Yeah, thanks very much, Joe. And Brian, have you any comments on that? I mean, you've gone through BCAR here in Ireland. I mean, that very large project in Longford. Could you tell us maybe about how you dealt with that there?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the key part of the current BCAR process, whether it's going to be amended, and I agree with Joe, there's definitely amendments needed for offsite, but the current process, it's all about setting out the certification process early. Who are the ancillary certifiers? Who is certifying which part of the assembly? And I think getting that documentation, that plan, that building control plan early, making sure it's clear with all the suppliers, because now there is such different variations in terms of suppliers integrating into the system, whether it be offsite or onsite. So having clarity is key. And I think communicating that, taking that at stages through projects, not leaving it towards the end, having milestones, critical milestones through the project for data download to ensure that the documentation is there, the inspections are happening, the ancillary inspections are happening, and that it all comes at the end of the job very, very easy. You know?
Yeah. I see there's an engagement on the chat between Lee Murphy and Stephen there about CVBBE. I suppose there has been some discussion in Ireland, and I know some of you may be aware of the recent report by on the Centre of Excellence and the construction sector group. And, so Stephen, that particular Centre Build Britain, Construction Innovation Hub, is that a service that's free to industry? Is that a service is that an innovation hub that's there to support industry? And how does it do that?
So the whole program there is really set up to drive innovation and transformation for the whole industry. There is currently, my understanding is currently about 40 key stakeholder partners who are involved with that process, who have gone through various stages of almost response to funding calls to explain what they can do, what they can achieve, how they can do, what are they already doing. And also the point of the program was that we didn't want to reinvent the wheel. It was more a case of, what are you doing? Show us what you've got. How can we now get you past the post or into the next stage to deliver this at scale? So it really is about everybody. So some of the work that we do within BRE is about the outcomes, the impact will be developing free-to-use technologies, applications and processes for all people or organisations interested in doing so. So there's no kind of signed up to it. There's no membership fee. It really is about driving the transformation for the industry with everybody's involvement. It doesn't mean we can cover everybody's views all of the time. But it really is about engagement and collaboration with as many organisations across the various themes that we have.
Yeah, well, I know that in Ireland there was a recent report by KPMG. I'm not sure if any of you saw that. We can distribute that maybe after the event, but it talks about a dedicated group to look at off-site manufacturing for Ireland, and that will be led by the CIF. And there's also talk about a centre of excellence for Irish construction, and that will be led by Enterprise Ireland. So hopefully we might see in the next 6, 12, well, I think it's 1 to 3 years timeline, a centre of excellence for construction, where, things like research into BCAR and offsite construction could be done and could support the industry. So any final questions from our audience, or any observations from any of the speakers before we go to the final presentation? No? Okay.